Okay, ready? Chronicles of Narnia. We're in book 3, The Horse and His Boy. See that? And we are in chapter 6 today, Shasta among the tombs. So, remember that Shasta had been mistaken for Prince Corin and swept up and into the party of the Narnians. And as a result, he found the way through the desert. And Prince Corin returned, and so he is moved out of the palace and trying to meet up with all the other runaways on the other side of Tashbaan and the tombs. So, chapter 6, Shasta among the tombs. Now, this is right as he's running away, leaving the house. Shasta ran lightly along the roof on tiptoe. It felt hot to his bare feet. He was only a few seconds scrambling up the wall at the far end, and when he got to the corner, he found himself looking down into a narrow, smelly street, and there was a rubbish heap against the outside of the wall, just as Corin had told him. Before jumping down, he took a rapid glance round him to get his bearings. Apparently, he had now come over the crown of the island hill on which Tashbaan was built. Everything sloped away before him. Flat roofs below flat roofs, down to the towers and battlements of the city's northern wall. Beyond that was the river, and beyond the river a short slope covered with gardens. But beyond that again, there was something he had never seen the like of. A great yellowish gray thing, flat as a calm sea and stretching for miles. I bet you it's the desert. On the far side of it were huge blue things, lumpy but with jagged edges, and some of them with white tops. The desert! The mountains, thought Shasta. He jumped down onto the rubbish and began trotting along downhill as fast as he could in the narrow lane, which soon brought him into a wider street where there were more people. No one bothered to look at a little ragged boy running along on bare feet. Still, he was anxious and uneasy till he turned a corner and saw that there was a city gate in front of him. Here he was pressed and jostled a bit, for a good many other people were also going out, and on the bridge beyond the gate the crowd became quite a slow procession, more like a queue than a crowd. A queue is a fancy word for a line. Out there, with a clear running water on each side, it was deliciously fresh after the smell and heat and noise of Tashbaan. When once Shasta had reached the far end of the bridge, he found the crowd melting away. Everyone seemed to be going either to the left or right along the river bank. He went straight ahead, up a road that did not appear to be much used, between gardens. In a few paces he was alone, and a few more brought him to the top of the slope. There he stood and stared. It was like coming to the end of the world, for all the grass stopped quite suddenly a few feet before him, and the sand began. Endless, level sand like on a seashore, but a bit rougher because it was never wet. Let's see now. The mountains, which now looked further off than before, loomed ahead. Greatly to his relief, he saw, about 5 minutes' walk away on his left, what must certainly be the tombs, just as Bree had described them. Great masses of moldering stone, shaped like gigantic beehives, but a little narrower. They looked very black and grim, for the sun was now setting right behind them. He turned his face west and trotted toward the tombs. He could not help looking out very hard for any signs of his friends, though. The setting sun shone in his face, so he could hardly see anything. And anyway, he thought, of course, they'll be round on the far side, on the farthest tomb, not this side where anyone might see them from the city. There were about 12 tombs, each with a low arched doorway that opened into absolute blackness. They were dotted about in no kind of order, so that it took a long time going around this one and going around that one before you could be sure that you had looked round every side of every tomb. This is what Shasta had to do. There was nobody there. It was very quiet here out on the edge of the desert, and now the sun had really set. Suddenly, from nowhere, or from somewhere behind him, there came a terrible sound. Shasta's heart gave a great jump, and he had to bite his tongue to keep himself from screaming. Next moment, he realized what it was: the horns of Tashbaan blowing for the closing of the gates. "Don't be a silly little coward," said Shasta to himself. "Why, it's only the same noise that you heard this morning." But there is a great difference between a noise heard letting you in with your friends in the morning and a noise heard alone at nightfall shutting you out. And now the gates were shut, he knew there was no chance of the others joining him that evening. Either they're shut up in Tashbaan for the night, thought Shasta, or else they've gone on without me. Oh, it's just that sort of thing Ervis would do. But Bree wouldn't. Oh, he wouldn't, would he? Now, in this idea about Ervis, Shasta was more than quite wrong. She was proud and could be hard enough, but she was true as steel and would never have deserted a companion, whether she liked him or not. Now that Shasta knew he would have to spend the night alone, it was getting it was getting darker every minute. He began to like the look of the place less and less. There was something very uncomfortable about those great silent shapes of stone. He had been trying his hardest for a long time not to think of ghouls, but he couldn't keep it up any more. Ghouls are a fancy name for ghosts. And my nose itches. Ugh. "Ow! Ow! Help!" he shouted suddenly, for at that very moment he felt something touch his leg. "Ooh, you thinking of ghosts and something touches your leg?" I don't think anyone can be blamed for shouting if something comes up from behind and touches him, not at such a place and such a time when he's frightened already. Shasta, at any rate, was too frightened to run. Anything would be better than being chased round and round the burial places of the ancient kings was something he dared not look at behind him. Instead, he did what was really the most sensible thing he could do. He looked round, and his heart almost burst with relief. What had touched him was only a cat. The light was too bad now for Shasta to see much of the cat, except that it was big and very solemn. It looked as if it might have lived for a long, long years among the tombs alone. Its eyes made you think it knew secrets it would not tell. "Puss, Puss," said Shasta, I suppose you're not a talking cat." The cat stared at him harder than ever. Then it started walking away, and of course Shasta followed it. It led him right through the tombs and out into the desert side of them. There it sat bolt upright, with its tail curled round its feet, and its face set toward the desert and towards Narnia and the north, as still as if it were watching for some enemy. Shasta lay down beside it with his back against the cat and his face toward the tombs, because if one is nervous, there's nothing like having your face toward the danger and having something warm and solid at your back. The sand wouldn't have seemed very comfortable to you, but Shasta had been sleeping on the ground for weeks and hardly noticed it. Very soon he fell asleep, though even in his dreams he went on wondering what had happened to Bree and Ervis and when. He was awakened suddenly by a noise he had never heard before. Perhaps it was only a nightmare, said Shasta to himself. At the same moment he noticed that the cat had gone from his back, and he wished it hadn't. But he lay quite still without even opening his eyes, because he felt sure he would be more frightened if he sat up and looked around at the tombs and the loneliness, just as you or I might lie still with the clothes over our heads. But then the noise came again, a harsh, piercing cry from behind him out of the desert. Then, of course, he had to open his eyes and sit up. The moon was shining brightly. The tombs, far bigger and nearer than he had thought they would be, looked gray in the moonlight. In fact, they looked horribly like huge people, draped in gray robes that covered their heads and faces. They were not at all nice things to have near you when spending alone and a night alone in a strange place. But the noise had come from the opposite side, from the desert. Shasta had to turn his back on the tombs, he didn't like that much, and stare out across the level sand. The wild cry rang out again. I hope it's not more lions, thought Shasta. It was, in fact, not very like the lion's roar he heard on the night when they met Hwin and Erebus, and it was really the cry of a jackal. But of course Shasta did not know this. Even if he had known, he would not have wanted very much to meet a jackal. The cries rang out again and again. There's more than one of them, whatever they are, thought Shasta, and they're coming nearer. I suppose that if he had been an entirely sensible boy, he would have gone back through the tombs nearer to the river where there were houses, and wild beasts were much less likely to come. But then there were, or he thought there were, the ghouls. To go back through the tombs would mean going back past those dark openings in the tombs, and what might come of them? It may have been silly, but Shasta felt he would rather risk the wild beasts. Then, as the cries came nearer and nearer, he began to change his mind. He was just about to run for it when suddenly, between him and the desert, a huge animal bounded into view. As the moon was behind it, it looked quite black, and Shasta did not know what it was except it had a very big shaggy head and went on four legs. It did not seem to have noticed Shasta, for it suddenly stopped, turned its head toward the desert, and let out a roar, which re echoed through the tombs and seemed to shake the sand under Shasta's feet. The cries of the other creatures suddenly stopped, and he thought he could hear feet scampering away. Then the great beast turned to examine Shasta. It's a lion, I know it's a lion, thought Shasta. I'm done. I wonder, will it hurt much? I wish it was over. I wonder, does anything happen to people after they're dead? Oh, here it comes. And he shut his eyes and his teeth tight. But instead of teeth and claws, he only felt something warm lying down at his feet. And when he opened his eyes, he said, Why, it's not nearly as big as I thought. It's only half the size. No, it isn't even quarter the size. I do declare it's only the cat. I must have dreamed all about that as being as big as a horse. And whether he was really dreaming or not, what was now lying at his feet and staring at him out of countenance with its big, green, unblinking eyes was the cat, though certainly one of the largest cats he had ever seen. Oh, Puss, gasped Shasta, I am so glad to see you again. I've been having such horrible dreams. And he lay down at once, with his back again, back to back with the cat, as they had been at the beginning of the night. The warmth from it spread all over him. I'll never do anything nasty to a cat again as long as I live, said Shasta, half to the cat and half to himself. I did once, you know. I threw stones at a half-starved, mangy old stray. Hey, stop that! For the cat had turned round and given him a scratch. None of that, said Shasta. It isn't as if you could understand what I'm saying. Then he dozed off. Next morning, when he woke, the cat was gone, and the sun was already up, and the sand hot. Shasta, very thirsty, sat up and rubbed his eyes. The desert was blindingly white, and though there was a murmur of noises from the city behind him, where he sat, everything was perfectly still. When he looked a little left and west so that the sun was not in his eyes, he could see the mountains on the far side of the desert, so sharp and clear that they looked only like a stone's throw away. He particularly noticed one blue height that divided into two peaks at the top, and decided that that must be Mount Pyre. That's our direction, judging by what the ravens said, he thought, so I'll just make sure of it so as not to waste any time when the others turn up. So he made a good, deep, straight furrow with his foot, pointing exactly to Mount Pyre. The next job, clearly, was to get something to eat and drink. Shasta trotted back through the tombs. They looked quite ordinary now, and he wondered how he could have ever been afraid of them, and down into the cultivated land by the riverside. There were a few people about, but not very many, for the city gates had been open several hours and the early morning crowds had already gone in. So he had no difficulty in doing a little raiding, as Bree called it. It involved a climb over a garden wall, and the results were 3 oranges, a melon, a fig or two, and a pomegranate. After that, he went down to the riverbank, not too near the bridge, and had a drink. The water was so nice that he took off his hot, dirty clothes and had a dip. For of course, Shasta, having lived on the shore all his life, had learned to swim almost as soon as he had learned to walk. When he came out, he lay on the grass, looking across the water at Tashbaan, all the splendor and strength and glory of it. But that made him remember the dangers of it, too. He suddenly realized that the others might have reached the tombs while he was bathing and gone on without me like as not. So he dressed in a fright and tore back at such speed that he was all hot and thirsty when he arrived, and so the good of his bathe was gone. Like most days, when you're alone and waiting for something, this day seemed about 100 hours long. He had plenty to think of course, but sitting alone, just thinking, is pretty slow. He thought a good deal about the Narnians and especially about Corin. He wondered what had happened when they discovered that the boy who had been lying on the sofa and hearing all their secret plans wasn't really Corin at all. It was very unpleasant to think of all those nice people imagining him a traitor. But as the sun slowly climbed up to the top of the sky and then slowly began going downwards to the west, and no one came and nothing at all happened, he began to get more and more anxious. And of course, he now realized that when they had arranged to wait for one another at the tombs, no one had said anything about how long. He couldn't wait here for the rest of his life, and soon it would be dark again, and he would have another night just like last night. A dozen different plans went through his head, all wretched ones, and at last he fixed on the worst plan of all. He decided to wait until it was dark, and then go back to the river and steal as many melons as he could carry, and set out for Mount Pyre alone, trusting for his direction to the line he had drawn that morning in the sand. It was a crazy idea, and if he had read as many books as you have about journeys over desert, he would never have dreamed of it. But Shasta had read no books at all. Before the sun set, something did happen. Shasta was sitting in the shadow of one of the tombs when he looked up and saw 2 horses coming towards him. Then his heart gave a great leap, for he recognized them as Bree and Hwin. But the next moment his heart went down into his toes again. There was no sign of Erebus. The horses were being led by a strange man, an armed man, pretty handsomely dressed up like an upper slave in a great family. Bree and Hwin were no longer got up like pack horses, but saddled and bridled. And what could that all mean? It's a trap, thought Shasta. Somebody has caught Erebus, and perhaps they've tortured her, and she's given the whole thing away. And they want me to jump out and run up and speak to Bree, and then I'll be caught too. And yet, if I don't, I may be losing my only chance to meet the others. Oh, I do wish I knew what had happened. And he sulked behind the tomb, not looking out every few minutes and wondering which was the least dangerous thing to do. Until then, next time, Chapter 7, Erebus and Tashbaan. Until then.